Hey guys, how's it going? Justin here with Practically Squared. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, what I wanted to bring you is our long-awaited overview video on the Dead Air Sierra 5. The Dead Air Sierra 5 is a 5.56 suppressor from Dead Air. A lot of people have been waiting a long time to get their hands on one of these guys. I remember whenever I first got into the suppressor world, all the way back in 2016, there were a bunch of guys clamoring for Dead Air to release a 5.56 can. Fast forward all the way to June of 2022, Dead Air finally decided to release the 5.56 can, and the Sierra is what we got. In today's video, we're going to go over all the specifications of this can, talk to you guys about some of the features that this can boasts, go over my opinions, my thoughts on it, and just kind of give you guys a brief observation overview of the can. Now, I have been able to shoot this can a good bit. I put 500 rounds through it, and I ran it on 4 different hosts, and I compared it to a couple other cans. I compared it to the Rugged Razor 5.56, which is Rugged's new 5.56 can. We also compared it to the Yankee Hill Machine Turbo T2, and I also threw in a Dead Air Nomad 30 cal can just for kind of a baseline comparison. We'll talk about that later in the video. So before we get any further in the video, I got to shed a little bit of a disclosure in terms of my relationship with Dead Air. Now, I am buddies to a certain extent with some of the guys over at Dead Air, and I do have the ability to get discounts on certain products. Now, in the case of the Sierra 5, I opted to not get a discount on this thing. I opted to pay full price for it, mainly because I wanted to get the can in and I wanted to get to play with it. Now, life kind of got in the way. I could have went and demoed this a lot at my dealer while it was an NFA gel, and I could have made a video on this a while ago, but I got really busy in my work aspect of life and some other things, and I kind of put it on the back burner. However, I did pay full price for this can. I didn't get any sort of special discount. I'm not, sponsored by Dead Air or anything like that. So this should theoretically be as unbiased and independent of a video as I could quite possibly bring you guys. Now, going over some basic level specifications to get you up to speed on what this can is. This is a 5.56 suppressor from Dead Air, so obviously 5.56 223. Don't run rimfire through it. It's a non-serviceable sealed suppressor, so pretty much 5.56 and any of your 22 caliber centerfire stuff is good to go. Now, it's going to come from the factory with 2 different options. You could either option it with Xeno or option it with Chemo. Now, no matter which mounting system you go with, it is going to feature 1 3/8 24 threads. So if you decide to change mounts or anything like that, you're able to take it out. One of the complaints that some people have with 1 3/8 24 is that if you're using it super hard or you're using it with certain mounts that tend to stick, you could run into a situation where your mount unscrews from your can and sticks to your muzzle device. Now, the way Dead Air remedied that was, number one, coming up with the Xeno system, but the Xeno system isn't for everybody. The other thing that they did on this can that I thought was pretty interesting is they actually put a pinhole here. I'll roll up a picture on the screen, but there's actually a hole here so you could pin and weld your mount into your can. If you don't want to ever have to worry about it, or say you want to direct thread this can and you want to pin and weld it to a barrel, that way you could reach an overall length to make a gun not an SBR anymore. You could obviously choose to do so. So it's something that for most people, it's not going to get in the way. It's not going to cause any sort of problems. But for those of you guys who want to pin and weld the mount or pin and weld whatever to it, you could opt to do that, which I thought was a really interesting feature. Now, going over some of the other basic specifications of this can, the Xeno configuration is going to come in at a street price of about $700. Obviously, price is subject to fluctuation. If you get the Chemo system, it's about $100 more. So you're talking about $800 street price. In terms of weight, the Xeno version is going to come in at just over 13 ounces. The Chemo version is going to come in just over 15 ounces. In terms of overall length, the Xeno is going to come in at around 5 3/4, and I believe the Chemo is about 6.5, 6 3/4, but I don't remember exactly. So if you're after ultimate lightweight, if you're after a smaller size, and if you're after a little bit cheaper, the Xeno is going to be the way to go. Personally, I've been a fan of the Xeno system ever since it came out, and it was absolutely going to be the option I chose. The Chemo system is really good, but it adds weight, and I feel it's kind of unnecessary in most instances. So that's why I opted to get the Xeno version. Now, comparing this to some of the other Dead Air cans, the Dead Air Nomad 30 is going to come in around 14 ounces with a direct red adapter. By the time you put a Xeno in there, you're talking about 15 or so, if I remember correctly. So you're saving a little bit of weight with this can over something like a Nomad line. And then if we compare it to the Sandman line, to make it apples to apples, comparing the Chemo Sierra to the Sandman S, you're talking a difference of about 3 ounces. And obviously, if you opt to go with the Xeno mount in your Sierra, you're saving about 4 or 5 ounces versus a Sandman S. Not to mention the weight of the muzzle device differences there. So whenever you go to a can like this, it's a 5.56 can that's going to feature the same durability that a Sandman is. It's got a full Stellite, full auto baffle stack, full auto rated baffle stack, I should say. It's pretty much going to handle anything that you could throw at it within reason. Obviously, any device is capable of being abused to the point where it could blow up. But as long as you're reasonable with this thing, running it on full auto, running it on short barrels, I wouldn't be too worried about it. There was a video whenever this can first came out. Somebody put it on like a 5-inch 5.56 full auto machine gun and ran a couple mags through it and ended up blowing one up. But like I said, any can out there, I don't care what it is, if you want to, you could blow a can up pretty easily. Are most people going to run it on a 5-inch 5.56 and do mag dump after mag dump? Probably not, because that's super abusive. But throwing this on your 11.5 semi-auto or semi-auto with a binary or even full auto, this is going to take the abuse pretty well within reason. Now, moving along, covering some of the other features of it, right? So you're getting a lighter weight package than most of your 30 cal cans, while it's going to be as durable, if not more durable, than most of those 30 cal cans you're comparing it to. Another really nice feature is the size. So it's 5 3/4 inches, and you're getting about the same sound suppression as a Sandman S, if not a little bit better. Comparing it to my Nomad, it really kind of is so host dependent whenever you compare suppressors. But I personally think that this can sounds a good bit better on all the hosts that I ran it on than my Nomad does. So you're getting better sound suppression out of this versus most of your other 30 cal cans. And it's going to be in a lighter package, and it's also going to be as durable, if not more durable. And then in terms of flash suppression, I haven't really got to run this can at night a lot. So that's something we'll have to cover in our long-term review. But from what I could tell, the flash hider end cap does a really good job, and I haven't noticed any sort of flash. I've only been able to shoot this in dusky conditions, though, so far. Going over some of the other features of this can. Now, one thing we got to talk about is the knurling. Whenever this can was first released, it kind of turned into a meme online because a guy said it looked like a peg on your bicycle, which I definitely see that correlation. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. However, I do think it's aesthetically a good looking can. It's utilitarian based. This can is really kind of designed to be thrown on your 5.56 AR and just go to town. In terms of back pressure, this isn't one of those flow through style suppressors. It features traditional style baffles. However, they did do a good job in terms of these baffles to not make them overly gassy. I would say that this definitely isn't as flow through as like an OSS or a Huxworks style can, but it's definitely not as gassy as something like the YHM Turbo T2. It's kind of in the middle, which personally I feel is a good spot to be, because if you throw this can on a tuned gun, especially a tuned piston gun, it's going to sound pretty good for a 5.56 can. It's not going to sound historically great or anything like that. No 5.56 can does, or no 5.56, a suppressor on a 5.56 does, but it sounds pretty good compared to a lot of other stuff. And it's pretty impressive given its overall size, package, and weight of it. So as you could tell, I'm pretty happy about the Sierra 5. It features a lot of good stuff. In terms of comparing it to some other stuff, what do you say we go out to the range, we roll some shooting footage here, and then we come back and kind of talk about how it compares to some other stuff? shoot one into the dirt. So going over what you guys just saw there, what we did was we ran it on a couple different hosts. We ran it on my BCM 14.5 inch that's pinned and welded with the Xeno flash hider. That's a good gun in terms of a 14.5, 16 inch ballpark gun. And it features a factory gas block. So it's a BCM gas block, non-adjustable, none of that stuff. So that gives us a good baseline of a standard AR-15. We ran it on a piston gun, my CZ Bren 2. It's an 11-inch 5.56, and it is a tuned piston gun. I do have a suppressor setting for that. And then we also ran it on my 20-inch White Oak Armament. That's a 20-inch kind of SPR style gun, got a little bit heavier barrel, and it does have a Superlative Arms bleed-off gas block on there, which is tuned not necessarily to this can, but it's tuned overall to work with most of my suppressors pretty good. So in terms of comparing it to some of the other stuff, we ran the Dead Air Sierra 5, we ran the Rugged Razor 5.56, we ran the YHM Turbo T2, and we ran the Dead Air Nomad 30 for a 30 cal comparison there. Now, one thing I do got to say, I wasn't able to run the Rugged Razor on a lot of the other hosts. Really, I just ran it on the Bren because I didn't feel like switching the mount around in terms of putting a rugged mount on all my other guns. And the Rugged does not feature a swappable mount. Whereas the Sierra, I was able to throw a rugged mount in it and be able to run it on there, and then throw a Xeno mount on it to run it on everything else. So comparing the Razor to the Sierra on my Bren 2, I felt that the Sierra definitely sounded better than the Razor. The Razor has more of a high-pitched tone to it, whereas the Sierra has more of a dead kind of dull tone to it. And I could definitely tell in terms of the actual sound level that the Sierra did sound a little bit better. Now, obviously, I'm not a decibel meter and I didn't decibel test this or anything like that. That's just going off of my perspective in terms of hearing the cans. I felt like in terms of back pressure on that can, I couldn't tell a difference. They both did really good. They were both really good cans for that host. Taking the Sierra over to some other guns, we'll talk about the BCM 14.5. The BCM 14.5 is a really good test for a can because it's a standard AR-15 with a non-adjustable gas block. Screwing the Sierra on there, I felt like it did a really good job in terms of back pressure, and it sounded pretty decent on that gun. Being that that gun isn't tuned, it never really sounds all that great because you are getting more back pressure coming back. My YHM Turbo T2 is a really good can, but it's super heavy in terms of back pressure, so I absolutely don't like to run that can on there. The Dead Air Nomad does a pretty good job on there. It's not overly gassy, and it does a decent job in terms of suppression. Comparing the Sierra sounded by far the best on that gun. It had a really good tone to it, sounded really good, and also had the least amount of back pressure. And I'm kind of on the fence about that. It was close in terms of the back pressure that this has and the back pressure that the Nomad has, but they both did a really good job. And I would say I like the tone of the Sierra better, so I would probably give it the edge on that host. Moving out to my 20-inch White Oak. The 20-inch White Oak, we ran the Nomad, the Turbo, and of course the Sierra on it. And the Turbo is kind of my go-to can for that gun, just because it's a long gun, it's a tuned gun, so the back pressure of the Turbo doesn't really matter. And, you know, it being so restrictive and me tuning it off there, it gives it a really good sound performance level. It's a 20-inch gun, so you got more dwell time and all that stuff. And honestly, the Turbo sounded as good as the T2 on that host. I'm not going to go as far as saying it sounded better. I'm not exactly sure. You would really need a decibel meter for me to be able to tell the difference between those two. But I was really impressed because the Sierra is like an inch shorter than the Turbo T2. So it was shorter than the T2 and sounded better. And that's one thing that, circling back to comparing the Sierra to the Razor on the Bren, the Razor 5.56 is like an inch longer too. Now the Razor doesn't have a lot of baffles in here. It's really designed to be a lower back pressure can, whereas the Sierra definitely has more baffles in here, but is a shorter package can. So overall, the Sierra really did kind of impress me in my initial testing with this can. Given its size, it boasts a pretty good amount of suppression, and overall features, like, it's pretty good. It's got a full Stellite baffle stack, so you don't have to worry about that. That's something that whenever I'm looking at a 5.56 can, obviously I want something that's going to sound decent compared to everything else on the market. That's kind of a baseline. I want it to, obviously, I don't want to throw an empty tube on there that's not going to give me any suppression. But suppression is one of those things that's a little bit lower on my totem pole for a 5.56 can. Personally, some of my big things are I want something that, number one, is going to have a good mount or a swappable mount, preferably a swappable mount. So you got the 1 3/8 threads in here, so you're good to go there. I want something that's going to be relatively lightweight, but I want something that's going to be durable. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. The Sierra is a super durable can, but it's still 13 ounces, which is pretty lightweight and checks those boxes too. And then overall other features that this can has. The pinhole for pinning and welding a mount and the flash hider end cap, those are both two things that I would consider added bonuses with this can. And in terms of flash suppression, which is another category, that flash hider end cap is going to help do a good job there. I haven't got to do any nighttime testing with this can yet, but we did shoot it a little bit whenever it was dusk out, and I didn't notice any flash coming out the end of it. So the Sierra really does kind of check all the boxes. Now, comparing it to the Razor and the Turbo T2, obviously this can is going to be a little bit more expensive, coming in at ballpark $700, versus you could get a Razor for about $600 and you could get a Turbo for like $500 or less. And years ago, you could get the Turbo even way cheaper than that. So you're paying a lot more for the Sierra 5, but honestly, I do kind of feel it's worth it. In terms of a suppressor, you got to look at it from the perspective of once you buy this thing, you're stuck with it forever. So if it's an extra $100 or $200 and it boasts some features that may be important to you, you're probably going to regret it if you don't splurge for the better one. So I always recommend doing that in terms of suppressors. So honestly, at the end of the day, what I'm kind of getting at is unless something else comes out that I get my hands on that really kind of blows me away, and there's nothing really on the market right now that's really drawing my attention, I'm going to go as far as saying the Sierra is probably my favorite 5.56 can on the market. A lot of really good features, really good weight, really good size, good sound suppression, good balance of back pressure, but still sounding good balance of flash suppression with that flash hider end cap, good features from the factory. Overall, it's not the most sexy looking can, the knurling. Some people love it, some people hate it. But overall, I think it's a good can. And like I said, I'd go as far as to say it's the 5.56 can to get these days. I'm super happy with it. Guys, if you have any questions or want to post anything down in the comment section below, share your thoughts and opinions. What do you think about the Sierra? Have you picked one up yet? Are you planning on picking one up? Is there any sort of thing that you would like to know about this that I didn't cover in this video? Definitely feel free to drop it down in the comment section below. Guys, as always, remember to train hard, shoot fast, and most importantly, be safe. God bless.